Hey there, Bruins fans! Welcome back to BNG Hockey, where it's always black and gold. Hockey is back, baby, and the Boston Bruins have officially announced their training camp roster. In this video, we're going to take a look at who I think the starters will be, and we'll look at some of the guys who will be on the Black Aces practice squad. Let's get started. Quickly, I wanted to go over what this roster actually means. This is not the final group that will be going to the hub city in Toronto. This is simply the group that's going to start competing on Monday at training camp. The Bruins still need to cut either one forward or one defenseman to get down to the 28 skaters the NHL is allowing you to bring to the hub city. That means there's going to be quite a bit of competition at this training camp to try and not be the odd man out. So I've put together my list of who I think the starters are, and I'll give you my thoughts on the Black Aces practice squad, and at the end of the video I'm going to tell you who I think is likely going to be cut and not travel to Toronto with the Bruins. Let's get started. With the forwards, it's pretty obvious who the locks are to be in the starting lineup. It will look the same as it did when the NHL paused. The best line in all of hockey with Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak. I think it'll be Krejci with Kasha and Ritchie. That line was together quite a bit at the end. Obviously, Ritchie and Kasha played on the same line with the Ducks, so you have a little bit of chemistry there. And we know that Krejci can make anybody good with his playmaking ability. And then you have a great third line of Bjork, Coyle, and DeBrusk. DeBrusk is having a pretty solid season, but could do a little bit more. That's why he was bumped down to the third line. But still, some might argue with Coyle, that's the second line. So that's a strong middle six group there for the Bruins. And the fourth line will most likely be some combination of Kuraly, Wagner, Nordstrom, or Lindholm, Kuraly, Wagner. You never really know, but I threw Nordstrom on here because he plays a little bit more than Par Lindholm. With the Black Aces forward group, you see Par Lindholm there. He would most likely be the one to jump into the lineup with any kind of injury, or if Bruce Cassidy wanted to make a change. Carson Kuhlman I would throw on that list. I don't really see it with Kuhlman, but Bruce Cassidy obviously has a lot of trust with him, throwing him in the Stanley Cup Finals Game 7 over David Backes. So obviously there's some trust there with the coach, and he would probably be thrown into the lineup quickly. Jack Studnicka is by far the best prospect in the entire Bruins system. He had 2 NHL games this season, and he's going to be a superstar for the Bruins eventually. I'd love to see him get in one of those round-robin games. The Bruins really only have to win 2 of those 3 games to grab their number 1 seed back. So if you ever wanted to rest some guys, even though they're coming off of quite a bit of rest, you could throw Studnicka into the lineup for a little bit of energy. We have Paul Carey, who's the captain of the Providence Bruins. He's an NHL veteran. You could always put him in there. He is experienced. You have Trent Frederick, who's a pretty solid prospect with some size. He can fight. If you wanted to get a little physical in the bottom 6, I think he would be a good guy for that. Senyshyn looked pretty good alongside Coyle this season when he had a couple of games. He had an injury problem and never really made his way back up. Some people really don't believe in that kid, but I think the Bruins aren't ready to give up on him yet. And then for whatever reason, we have Anton Bleed, who never really goes away. I don't have a problem with him, but I don't think he does anything special. He's a fourth-line guy, but I'd much rather see a Wagner, a Kuraly, a Nordstrom, a Lindholm. I'd even throw Frederick on the fourth line before I'm throwing in Anton Bleed, but he was on the roster at the NHL pause, so clearly the Bruins like him. The only question I have on the back end is who the 6th defenseman will be. We have Chara McAvoy, Krug Carlo, Matt Grzelcyk, but who to pair with him? I put Jeremy Lauzon. The kid's having a great season. He got himself a contract extension. He's responsible on his own end. He has a solid shot, not afraid to play physical, and has a good amount of speed. We do have to remember that Connor Clifton was a little banged up, and that's why he lost his job this season. But if you want to go with lefties and righties throughout the lineup, you would put Grzelcyk on the left and Clifton on the right. But if you're not afraid of playing 2 lefties together, then you have the options of either Lauzon and Grzelcyk or John Moore and Grzelcyk. Obviously, John Moore has played a lot more NHL games, so maybe Bruce Cassidy is comfortable with giving the job to Moore and making it his job to lose. And to no one's surprise, we have Rask and Halak in the net. As far as the Black Aces go, obviously we have John Moore and Connor Clifton, as I was saying before. Those would be guys who would jump into the lineup at any time if you want to make a switch or for injury, and you'd be perfectly fine because those are two NHL-ready defensemen. We don't see Steven Kampfer here. He actually decided to opt out due to family reasons. So we're seeing two kids get a shot at it with Zboril and Vakanainen. Zboril is in the same boat as Senyshyn. The Bruins really don't want to give up on him, but he came from that star-studded 2015 draft, and he's just nowhere near any of his peers. But the Bruins are giving him another kick at the can here by inviting him to training camp, but he's definitely the worst of the two. Vakanainen is an elite defenseman. He's one of the Bruins' top prospects. He's having a pretty solid season in Providence, but some would argue that Zboril is having a better season in Providence. Overall, I think Vakanainen will be the better NHL defenseman. They have the same amount of small NHL experience, so I think if it came down to it, I would choose Vakanainen, and the Bruins would too. But you never really know. As far as goalies go, you can bring as many goalies as you want to the hub, but it looks like the Bruins are choosing to only bring 4. Now, the reason I say only is it's very rare, but you could blow through all 4 of your goalie options with injuries. And the way 2020 is going so far, I am horrified at the thought of seeing Carson Kuhlman playing goalie because all 4 of the Bruins options got injured. So, knock on wood that doesn't happen, and the Bruins are going to be just fine. These options are 2 good options for the Black Aces goalies. They have Max Lagacé, who has a little bit of experience with the Vegas Golden Knights before signing in Boston, and is having a very strong season with Providence. Speaking of strong seasons, we have Dan Vladar, who's absolutely huge. I thought this guy would be the backup for the Bruins next season, but obviously we re-signed Yaroslav Halak, so I could see Vladar someday making the jump for the Bruins, potentially even being a starter because he's having a solid season with the Providence Bruins as well. After taking a look at this roster, I would say that the Bruins will end up cutting a forward. I think it's a lot easier for a defenseman to play forward than a forward to play D if the injuries started to rack up. So I think it would just make sense that the Bruins end up cutting one of these forwards. As far as my choices, I would say Paul Carey. He's a little bit older. I think the Bruins will be looking for speed and physicality and youth to make this Black Aces team, and if they had injuries, that's what they'd want to inject into their lineup. So that goes against Paul Carey quite a bit. If they decide to keep Carey, I would say it would be one of Bleed or Senyshyn. And as I said before, the Bruins have a weird thing with Anton Bleed. So final answer, I would probably say Zach Senyshyn does not make the cut. I hope that he does. I would go with Paul Carey, but we'll have to see. That's all I got for you in this one. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you're as pumped as I am that hockey is back, make sure to give this video a big like. And if you haven't already, subscribe.